John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thanks for joining me on Newsmaker. Space, the final frontier. We've heard that before. Once the domain for governments competing to demonstrate technical superiority in space. Think the race to the moon in the 1960s that pitted the U.S. against Russia. But in the last 10 years, huge private companies and billionaires have begun to dominate our adventures into space. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and others have opened a whole new chapter of spaceflight. The question is, on balance, is this a good or bad thing? Dr. Jim Rice, research scientist with the new Space Initiative at ASU, joins me now on Newsmaker. Dr. Rice, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I kind of laid it out. We were used to, for decades, NASA running the show. That is no longer the case, is it?
Well, NASA's still running the show to a degree, but you're right. There's a lot of private companies that are helping NASA run the show, if you think of it that way. SpaceX, you mentioned, and Blue Origin are two of the big ones. There are many, many others out there. But for instance, the Artemis program is NASA's big push to get American astronauts back on the surface of the moon. It just so happens SpaceX is a major contributor to that effort, and so is Blue Origin. As a matter of fact, they're both building the human landing systems, the landers, to take the astronauts down to the surface of the moon. They both won contracts from NASA. So NASA is still leading this effort, but there's a lot of help coming from the private industry. And what they'll do is these companies will basically sell their services to NASA, which before that was not the model at all. When SpaceX or Blue Origin gets their landing system perfected and ready to put NASA astronauts on the moon, they can also use that to take other type of people who want to go or pay to go there. SpaceX is also talking about eventually getting people to Mars.
Now, some of this is actually consistent because we've always had private companies, aerospace companies, helping out NASA. You think of Boeing and Northrop Grumman, deeply involved in the space program. It was just a different dynamic how it worked, right? They weren't developing stuff and saying, hey, NASA, we've got this, buy it. NASA would develop it. They would model it out and say, you build it for us, right?
Well, you're exactly right. Like Boeing and some of the companies are gone now, North American Rockwell, but some of these big conglomerate aerospace companies would win contracts from NASA to build elements like the Apollo program. Like it was Grumman Aerospace won the contract to build the lunar module that landed the Apollo astronauts on the moon. North American Rockwell, which is, all these companies are gone now. They've merged, some have just disappeared. They built like the Apollo Command Service Module. So, and Chrysler was building some of the engines on the Saturn V, and Boeing was involved in the Saturn V. But so they were awarded contracts from NASA to build these elements of the program, a booster, a lander, or a capsule, whatever it was, or spacesuits. And then NASA had full control of that. NASA was the only person using that. Whereas now these companies are winning contracts from NASA, but they can also take that and sell their services to private citizens or whatever their interests are for their company.
Is there a trade-off here? There's some concern when you read about this privatization of space that the U.S. Is giving away some of its foothold on defense potential in space by letting private companies take this over, that we may be compromising, in other words, national security. Do you see that as a risk or a problem?
I don't think so. There's enough layers of security that are built into these contracts when you're developing something like launching a spy satellite for the NRO or the DoD. There's levels and layers of security you have to still go through. And so I don't think it's really any more of a risk because, for instance, SpaceX will launch some classified satellites that you can see the launch, but after that, you don't know anything about it. And so that's kind of always been the case. And you can track these orbits when you see them enough to build up the orbital elements, but you still don't know what the payload is doing. And so the levels of security are still there. I don't work specifically in DoD programs. I don't know if they're more stringent or the same as before, but I do know there are a lot of, layers and hurdles there that keep the security intact.
So there's synergy between the private companies and the government to try to do some of this stuff.
Yes, and they have, they have agreements. They can't some things they don't know. Like, like SpaceX, I don't know this for sure now, but SpaceX will launch a payload. They don't really know what that payload is. They know the mass, the volume, the power, everything they need to put it in proper orbit, but they don't know exactly what that payload is going to do once it gets to its station keeping in Earth orbit.
I've got
They won't know, the DOD or whoever the DOD or the National Research Organizations, they'll run those things themselves, the operators, and cameras, sensors, or whatever they have on there. SpaceX won't be doing that. SpaceX is like a delivery service. They take it and push it out, and then whatever Navy, Air Force, Space Force, DOD, whoever it is in there, the DOD umbrella will operate and control the thing.
I've got to ask you this. You know, I was around when we landed on the moon in 1969. I was 9 years old. Why do I feel, you know, I guess there's some excitement about returning to moon, but for me personally, I've got to be really honest. I feel like been there, done that. Show me something new. Am I alone in this? I feel like we've kind of stalled a little bit.
Well, I'm about the same age as you. I remember the Apollo 11 landing very well. I was 10 years old that summer. And, you know, we went to the moon and we quit in 1972. We just stopped. We could have continued. Plans were to build a base on the moon, and then push them out to Mars. But the money wasn't there. It wasn't a national priority, bottom line, and that means the money. So NASA, since those decades, has been stuck in low Earth orbit, you know, with shuttle and the space station. And I'm excited because we're leaving low Earth orbit for the first time in over 50 years and going back to the moon. Now, you can say kind of been there, done that. Well, in terms of the destination, we've been there and done that. But in terms of the specific destination, we have not. We're going to be landing at the South Pole of the moon with the Artemis program. The South Pole is terra incognita. We don't know a lot about what's down there. The reason we're attracted to that site is in these permanently shadowed craters, there are these water ice deposits.
Yes.
And that's why we're being drawn down there. But, you know, no spacecraft has successfully landed in the South Polar area of the moon. Now, you know, when you land there, it's not going to look, I don't think, dramatically different than the lunar surface we've seen from other missions. But in terms of scientific details, there will be differences down there. For instance, the sun will never be any higher than around 7 degrees above the horizon because you're down at the South Pole. It does a circle in the sky. If you've ever been to the polar regions on Earth, you've experienced something like this. And you get these long shadows you'll have down there. It'll be very different. I mean, there's a lot of challenges there the Apollo astronauts didn't have because they landed in equatorial areas. Now, people say, you know, we did that, you know, 50 plus years ago. Well, the people that did that are retired or gone, and we're having to learn how to do it again. And it is not, the reason it's not happening as quick as some people want. It's not, the money is not there, basically, to be honest with you. I mean, the Apollo program was part of the Cold War effort of the US to defeat the Soviet Union. And the money was there. Fear is a great motivator. And there was a space race between the Soviet Union and the US, and we, of course, won it hands down. But the money was there. NASA's budget is it's a pittance for what it was in the 1960s.
But that's where the privatization comes in, right? The privatization can fill that gap, right?
That's right. I mean, you know, they're getting some NASA contract money, but they're also putting their own money. I'm talking about specifically SpaceX and Blue Origin, the billionaires, you know, Musk and Bezos. They're putting their own money into this thing.
Yes.
And the other companies, to some degree, they're doing the same thing, I think. The big ones you hear about, they're, you know, they got skin in the game because they're putting their money on the line in concert with NASA contract money.
Okay, we've got about a minute and a half. The thing that excites me is Mars. How close or how far are we from trying to send a mission to Mars? Can you give me a time frame?
Yeah, but you know, it's hard to do these things because things in DC can change on a dime depending on the political winds and the initiative and the wherewithal if you really want to make it a priority. But if the president came on TV tonight and said, I'm going to make it a goal to land Americans on Mars, you're probably talking about optimistically 10 to 15 years. And that means getting all the funding you need, like the Apollo program did, which NASA is nowhere close to that these days. If it became a national priority, I mean, a serious national priority to do this, I think 10 to 15 years, a lot of things got to go right in that time frame. There's a lot of stuff we got to do and we don't
Yes.
understand, but we could do it. Just the same way when we went to the moon in the 60s, we had no clue how to do that. We figured it out. But unfortunately, it all comes down to the dollars. You know, you have to have the money to do the development and testing. So it's still, you know, a decade and a half plus away.
Jim, I'm running out of time here. I'm running out of time literally on the planet.
I'll have to come back.
I want to see this. I want to see this happen in my lifetime. And I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I mean, growing through grad school, I thought by now we would have astronauts on Mars, and apparently, obviously, we haven't. But at least we're getting ready to go back to the moon, and I'll take that because that's a sign of progress versus being stuck in low Earth orbit.
Well, the one thing about that I am excited about, the visuals now with the technology and the camera enhancements and everything that's happened with cameras and that technology, the pictures are going to be absolutely stunning.
Yeah, they will, and they'll be tweeting and whatever they call it up there, you know, at the time. It'll be different than the first time around.
Oh yeah, yeah. Dr. Rice, Jim Rice from ASU, I really appreciate it, and you know, to the heavens. Let's see if we can do something exciting here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for interest. It was my pleasure.
Yep, great to see you, Doctor. Thank you. Coming up next on Newsmaker, their mission is to protect the rights of animals, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. We've had a little go-around with them here at Fox 10 over the years, but we're having them on. They're joining me next on Newsmaker. Back on Newsmaker. If you've watched over the years, from time to time, we have made fun of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, as they took over the Wienermobile, threw red paint on people wearing fur, put up a billboard that said a shark attack on a kid was revenge against humans who had it coming anyway. A representative of PETA reached out to me after one of our tongue-in-cheek rants on the news about dogs that were dyed to make look like pandas. Well, PETA hates that kind of stuff. I do too, actually. And we pointed out that PETA would go crazy. So it was very nice that they sent me an email that was super nice and very friendly. And I thought, you know, we need to have these guys on to explain what they're all about, because I believe in fair play and airing divergent viewpoints. So here we go. Amanda Brody from PETA. She is the assistant manager and senior campaigner for PETA. She joins me on Newsmaker. Welcome aboard enemy territory. No, it really isn't. It really isn't. We have fun. You guys do some crazy stuff, but you've been described, PETA has been described as by far the most successful radical organization in America. Now, would that be a point of pride, or would you take issue with that?
I say that's a point of pride. You know, PETA for the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals is the world's largest animal rights organization, and we were established in 1980, and with the goal of establishing and defending the rights of all animals. And we operate under a very simple principle that animals are not ours to use and kill for laboratory experiments, for food, for clothing, or for entertainment, or for any other reason. And as you mentioned, we use a lot of different tactics to reach our goals, and that looks like undercover investigations, animal rescues, demonstrations, groundbreaking litigation, and advertisements, just to name a few. But we get attention, and that's what we want. We want people to think about the ways in which animals are suffering every single day and how we can help save their lives.
Okay, I have two cats I love very much, Harold and Sedona. Am I an oppressor? Is this bad to have pets?
Not at all. It's a very common misconception of one of PETA's stances. I have cats myself who are my whole life. PETA encourages people to go to their local open admission shelter and adopt an animal if they have the time and resources to do so, because it is a very big commitment. And we encourage people to always spay and neuter their animals and never buy from a pet store or a breeder. It is very important because we are actually in an overpopulation crisis of dogs and cats in the United States. At any time, there are millions of homeless animals on the streets or in shelters who are in need of a loving home. So I love that you have two cats. I do myself as well. And
Okay, so that is not frowned upon. Then that's a misconception, because I keep reading that you guys think that people should not own pets.
It's definitely a misconception. We want people to go to open admission shelters and adopt animals if they have the time and resources to do so, and that they need to spay and neuter because it's so important. So many animals are in need of homes right now.
Amanda, were you aware of the big flap down here about dolphinaris when we had these dolphins down here in the desert, and it drew a ton of protest, and eventually it shut down? We had several dolphins die in captivity there, and they ended up shutting the entire thing down. Were you guys involved in that? I think you were.
Yeah, PETA always encourages people to stay far away from any facility like that that keeps dolphins in tiny concrete tanks. It's extremely unnatural for them. In the wild, they can swim hundreds of miles a day and dive to depths that are very deep in the ocean, and they're denied everything that is important and natural to them when they are kept in these tiny concrete tanks. So we encourage people to stay far away, and we want to see places like that shuttered for good, because those animals do not belong in those tiny concrete tanks.
That would go then for zoos, and what else?
So any place that keeps an animal in captivity for entertainment is always going to involve the suffering of them because their needs and wants aren't being met. PETA's position on zoos is that wild animals should be in the wild, but when they can't, they need to be in accredited facilities that can care for them. But we encourage people to never buy a ticket to places like SeaWorld or any place that imprisons animals for entertainment.
Okay, let's talk about lab animals, because we went through this in Tucson when I was working down there. There was a group, I don't think it was you, but it was, I'm trying to remember the group that is pretty radical about this stuff. They busted into the labs at U of A in the medical area and freed mice, rabbits. This happened back in the 80s. They didn't like experimentation on animals for medical research. Where do you guys stand on that? Because, you know, when we're talking about curing cancer and curing AIDS, I don't know that there's another answer.
PETA strongly opposes using animals for experimentation, and in fact is one of the founding pillars that we were created for. But the truth is that animal experimentation is a huge failure. More than 95% of drugs that appear safe and effective in animals go on to fail in human clinical trials. The National Institutes of Health, which is one of the largest funders of animal experimentation in this country, has even said that animal experimentation does not work. They are wasting billions of our taxpayer dollars on testing that does nothing to improve human health, and it just causes suffering of animals who are individuals that feel pain and fear and don't want to be in these cages for their entire lives, being poked and prodded and having unimaginable things done to them until they're eventually killed, all for experiments that do nothing to improve human health or find the treatments and cures that so many people are waiting for. But luckily, PETA scientists have created a roadmap called the Research Modernization Deal to get people to move away from using animals in experimentation and switch to modern, human-relevant 21st century research methods that don't involve animals.
Okay, you know your president and co-founder, Ingrid Newkirk. She insists that the world would be better without people. Here's a quote: "Humans have grown like a cancer. We're the biggest blight on the face of the earth." How do you have that message and then try to bring people into your tent?
Well, when we look at what humans do to animals, it's very hard to, see that humans are the ones who are causing so much exploitation and abuse to animals. And every animal is someone, just like humans. Animals feel pain and fear and stress, but also love and joy and companionship. And so PETA encourages everyone every day to make changes in their lives that can help animals, and simply through how they eat or what they choose to wear, or maybe the products that they're buying, they can improve animals' lives.
I take it the Westminster Dog Show is a non-starter for you guys. I think you put out a statement that you were concerned about Sage, the 3-year-old miniature poodle, that will face a lifetime of exploitation.
Yeah, breeding any dogs or cats is always cruel and irresponsible because we are in an overpopulation crisis. And PETA focuses on some of these breeds that are going to face a lifetime of suffering, like breathing impaired breeds who are purposely bred to have really shortened snouts or flattened faces that cause them pain and discomfort for their entire lives. Some of these dogs are not even going to be able to enjoy the basic things that make dogs' lives joyful and fulfilling, like going on a walk or chasing a ball or playing with other dogs, because they're gasping for breath. But it's very simple on how we can end the suffering of these animals, is by no longer breeding, buying them, or promoting these breathing impaired breeds, and for everyone to go to their local open admission shelter and adopt an animal, and always spay and neuter them, and never buy from a pet store or a breeder.
So the idea that humans are the apex species, you guys would quarrel with that. You would say animals, human beings are really just another animal species, no more special, more important than any other animal, right?
Animals are like us in all of the ways that matter, and we can improve our lives by not eating them specifically. Nobody needs to eat meat, dairy, or eggs, since we can get everything we need from a healthy vegan diet. There are so many delicious vegan foods that are available every single day, everywhere, that taste and smell just like animal-based meats, but have none of the cholesterol or cruelty involved.
You guys are masters of media manipulation. I mean, the stunts you guys have pulled through the years, that's the stuff that we have a laugh about on the news. But in fairness, what is a misconception out there that you would like to clear up, since you got an opportunity to do it? Is there something we get wrong about PETA?
Well, at the heart of everything that PETA does is the idea that all beings, regardless of their species, should live a life free from human abuse and exploitation. And we use all opportunities that we can to grab people's attention, start the conversation and discussion, and hopefully encourage people to take meaningful action and changes that can help improve the lives of animals every single day.
Amanda, are you glad we reached out to you?
I'm so happy you had us on. We can clear up some misconceptions, and people can learn about the ways that they can help animals, whether it's what we eat or what we wear or where we choose to spend our day. We have so much impact on animals. With the small choices that we make every day, we can prevent enormous suffering.
Okay, I can't promise that we're not going to tease you from time to time, but you're a good sport to come on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Amanda Brody from PETA. Thank you, Amanda. We are back in a moment on Newsmaker. Thanks as always for joining us on Newsmaker. Enjoyed having PETA on. That I've never had them on the program before. And obviously Dr. Rice talking about the privatization of space. We will see you next week on Newsmaker.